people come to the United States and tell you how much they hate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to hear those things from a stranger either. They want you to behave like a guest so that they can behave like a host, because this is our natural human way of interacting with one another, right? We don't have an abstract sense of things. We actually have a concrete sense of things, and we interact with one another as if we were still small hunter-gatherer societies hosting and guesting around one another's hearths, I think. And when we stray too much from that behavior, we really get into trouble.
I agree with you 100%, and I want to defend my American friends a little bit. I think it's a certain cohort of people who are on vacation and who come from a certain privileged class who behave a certain way. When we lived in America, I was running the other way when I heard a German voice because I knew that German tourists in California are the most obnoxious people. And again, I mean, it's interesting, were are these people obnoxious at home? Or are, are they adopting a kind of a semi-colonial attitude abroad,
Mhm.
which I actually,
Well,
yeah.
I used to live in Santa Cruz, and I would find that people, tourists who came to Santa Cruz, even from towns that weren't that far away, often treated people in Santa Cruz as if we were a bunch of foreigners that they could just like ignore our feelings about everything. I mean, it was really really funny. So it's very
It's
easy to
almost
become a
like that.
foreigner for someone else, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, I think it's the role. It's almost like when we enter the car, we become different people, as
right,
opposed to when we're on a bicycle. And this is the role
right.
that we have in that complex society. I mean, this goes back to your book. People have different roles. Um, as you were talking about empathy and knowing oneself, I have prepared a slide here from the coolest quote in your book. Actually, it's not. It's number two, but it's the one where I think Evrim says, "I think therefore I doubt I am. I think therefore I doubt I am." Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, this is so Evram, the android who is one of the main characters in the book, is struggling with the idea that they may not be conscious. And the
Hmm.
argument that's made to them is that if you're struggling with the idea of whether you are conscious or not,
Hmm.
you're conscious.
Hmm.
The ability to doubt whether you truly exist is probably the best fundamental truth, the fundamental like sign of your existence. There is someone there doubting that that someone is there, right? And so, what I sort of, because I know this kind of extends into
That's
another
the feeling
another.
that I had when I worked at this at the psychiatric institution as a civil servant when I was
Uh,
19. I felt the people, our patients or our clients, were much more alive than the people outside, and they constantly questioned themselves, "Who am I?" And I mean, this is all, I'm not trying to make light of it or a joke of it, but truly, you find, yeah. Anyways, I think people. Before I go too
no,
much into my anecdotes, go ahead. Rescue
oh,
me.
I really do think that 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 ability to have those recursive conversations with yourself
Yep.
are sort of the proof that that recursivity, recursive activity is largely what consciousness is. It is this ability to have these internal dialogues with one's self, right? And self is almost like a misnomer because it's clear from the fact that you're having an internal dialogue that there's more than one thing in there, right?
Right.
But but the fact that there are these different instances of yourself which you can sort of play act with inside your own head and have these conversations, and that thought is composed of this activity of having a conversation, is the proof that one exists, and probably the only proof you're going to get.
The relationship of the android Evrim and his mother is fascinating. Another one, I want to put up this little excerpt here. This is where the Dr. Hawin is talking to her boyfriend, maybe. And
No, no spoilers, right?
okay, right. You stop me, Ray, if I give away too much. But basically, there are AI companions are available. Um, and this immediately got me thinking about chatbots being pushed for psychotherapy, which I find truly troubling, quite
Mm,
honestly. Sort of outsourcing, not outsourcing, but replacing uh, medical professionals in that field with chatbots just to make people feel a little bit better. Um,
yeah.
and here that Hawin says to her AI companion, she says, "Being with you was easy because all you are is a loop, feeding my thoughts back to myself." I know people in the audience are like, okay, so what's different from a therapist? That's what he does, and he gets the big bucks. No, just an externalized version of my own thought processes, given a different shape, and it felt like it was helping, but it wasn't. I don't need agreement. I need resistance. I really love that line. I don't need agreement. I need resistance. You need to rub against something, right, Ray? Other, if you don't do that, you will not really form a personality. I mean, this is I'm convinced. I have this discussion with other parents all the time about,
I believe this, and
yeah.
I think we're fundamentally in society. One of our greatest responsibilities is to resist one another. Right?
Hmm.
One of our greatest responsibilities is to engage with each other and also to argue with each other. And I mean this in really mostly a respectful way, but sometimes an intense way. Like our job is to argue with each other about our ideas and to have it out and to really discuss things and get down to the details of it, because I do think that this is what makes us better people. We when we have to defend our arguments, right? And when we do this in good faith, and I should stress that, I mean in good faith. Resist one another in good faith, right? Not just to lie about the facts, right? Or to distort reality or fill the atmosphere with disinformation, but really to resist one another in the sense of like, why do you think that? I don't believe that. Can you explain to me why you hold this opinion? And here's what I believe, and why don't you think that is true? I think that this makes us richer and wiser and better, and it's how we're going to get where we're going. So Charles Sanders Peirce, who is a great 19th century philosopher and semiotician, had this idea of basically out there in the world there are facts, but that they're almost unapproachable by individuals. And that what science fundamentally is a collective stripping away of falsehoods until we get to the actual thing itself. That this might take thousands of years, but it's something that we have a responsibility to do with one another. And that's what I think resistance is all about. It's all about questioning each other, questioning our ideas, and doing that in this open manner. But I really want to say, I want to come back to it and kind of end this sermon with the idea that it has to be in good faith,
Yeah.
right? It has to be within the sense of the collective, with an empathy for where the other person is coming from, and with the idea that one will argue fairly and in the open with others.
Ray, I couldn't agree with you more. I would even extend this to relationships. Although my wife, who is interestingly enough a lawyer, so she was taught how to argue, might disagree and say, other people get along and we argue all the time. So how would you apply this to a personal relationship, Ray?
um, so I think that people mistake arguing or an activity that needs to involve having one's feelings hurt.
Hmm.
And I don't think that argument well conducted involves damage to one party or the other. And that's really where the good faith comes in. Argument well conducted is conducted with empathy for the other side. If empathy isn't there, then communication isn't happening. So if empathy isn't there, you're also not going to convince anyone of your own point of view.
Right.
If you don't have empathy for where they're coming from and where their point of view, what their point of view is and how they might have gotten there, you'll never convince them. So you might say that what I'm really talking about is discussion, but I'm talking about discussions about that involve a lot of opposition, right? And that are fundamentally difficult. Those are really hard to have in a relationship, and especially hard to have in good faith, right? But I think that a lot of relationships end up getting hurt by bad faith arguments, right? Where you're trying to destroy the other person's sense of self, or gaslight them, or undermine them, or something like that, because of something that's going wrong in your own head. That's really where a relationship goes wrong. You can always have discussions about disagreements that you have over ideas without harming one another.
Very well said. And I think this applies to the relationship here, the book um, with the AI, because, well, as it says here in the quote, it's just sort of this loop without adding anything in good or bad faith. Um,
Hmm.
Shyla is asking your local chat, in an interview you said you felt a book could be both entertaining and thought-provoking. How do you find that balance? And Shyla says, these quotes here are quite thought-provoking. This is an interesting question because I struggle with, people know this, I have a kind of a disdain for formulaic entertainment. Um,
Hmm.
but I understand the need for it. I understand genre fiction with certain tropes that need to be in there and all this kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, I mean, how do you square that circle?
And I think it's something that every writer who's trying to balance those two things probably has a different determination of how they're done.
Yeah, and
For me,
it's even a question of how you define that even. I mean, some people may
yeah,
produce formulaic entertainment and don't even see that as not thought-provoking, or I mean, I don't know. I haven't spoken to any directors of these Marvel movies that I haven't seen, but I don't like.
right.
That sounds
I mean,
awfully ignorant, but
right.
I stand by
I,
my statement. Go ahead.
I would say, let's see if I can come up with a good example of a film or a book that I think strikes this balance. I actually think that the film Alien strikes this balance really well.
Yes. Hmm.
Alien is extremely gripping and entertaining, and really terrifying. I think it really works well as a horror film. And it also opens up all of these philosophical questions, right? About birth, and about like all of these all of this sort of deeper philosophy, which Alien 3, incidentally, sort of doesn't handle in maybe as well cinematically, but also does some interesting things playing with. Blade Runner might be another good example of a book that really fundamentally tries to address what it is to be human and what memories are, and some other issues. I think it's a little bit dated, especially in some of its gender uh, issues that it has. I've actually talked about this a bit elsewhere, um, but there are ways to do this. But I think, how do I find that balance? I find it for myself in the sense that I'm a reader of my own work, and so as I'm writing, I'm also trying to determine whether I would be getting bored at this point, right?
Yep.
Am I engaging myself? Am I feeling that the rhythm is correct? Does something need to be pared down in favor of something else? I'm very interested in balance. And I think that one of the things that you learn, and keep in mind, I was writing for 30 years before The Mountain and the Sea was published. One of the things you learn over decades of writing is how to balance multiple elements. And hopefully that's something that, after 30 years, I'm doing well. Not everybody thinks it is, but some people seem to. So that's good.
This is really interesting because I'm a big. Sometimes I call myself as like a recovering snob a little bit. There's a great literature critic, and he wrote a bunch of books as well. Harold Bloom, an American, and the German equivalent
Right.
would be Marcel Reich-Ranitzky, and they both are very similar. People outside of Germany don't know who Marcel Reich-Ranitzky is. Look him up. It's a fascinating figure, and they both had a disdain, which I don't agree with the immense vehemence that they uttered it, but they felt that literature is not really a place for sort of activism or bringing issues into it. They felt that the art form of literature or great literature is being sort of watered down if it's used as a vehicle for bringing social or political issues to the fore. I wonder how
Well, I
you
guess.
feel about that, because to me, you have a perfect balance here, and I certainly don't agree with that assessment, although I have deep respect for Harold Bloom and Reich Ranitzky, but I disagree fundamentally with that. It's only the issue to me is only if somebody wants to shoehorn a current issue into a plot somehow to
Mhm.
to make it like, oh yeah, cool, I'm kind of issue conscious, almost like the Germans, if they
Sure.
want to win an Academy Award, they have to put some Nazis into the movie. But
Mm.
yeah,
Uh, I guess that they both hate the Iliad, right?
good point.
Um, I think that it's a piece of crap because the Iliad is fundamentally about issues, right? It is
Mhm.
about how to be a human being and what it means to be heroic, and a lot of it is about the way that it's translated. I think that it's in the, and I'm just looking on my own shelf, in the, I think it's the Robert Fagel's translation that begins with rage, right?
Mhm.
This is a book about anger, the rage of Achilles, right? And the way that that rage and his refusal to fight results in the death of so many other people. The negative effect that rage has on the collective. How can you say that that's not an issue,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That this is just pure entertainment and that issues have no place. I don't understand how you would make that statement about a book. It just doesn't.
Now I feel I'm distorting their points of view a little bit. I think it was I don't want to get too off a tangent. I agree with you 100%. And now I'm relating what comes across with interviews that I saw with both of these important and deep thinkers. I feel that Harold Bloom specifically was talking about contemporary American writers, that they're just too enamored with social issues,
Hmm.
that they didn't. I think his point was that they are neglecting the craft, essentially.
The Greeks only believed in the social and
Mhm.
only wrote about social issues. I don't think that the Greeks ever wrote anything else. And even when they were writing about the gods, they were writing about social issues, about how people should be in society.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I don't. I think that what Bloom didn't like, and I've read a lot of Bloom, and I'm not going to be black and white about Harold Bloom.
People are
I,
complex.
but people are complex, and he is a complex person, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. I think that
I'm going to
his
put it
book
in the
about
local chat. How to Read and Why is a great book here. Shyla has put, by the way, the Iliad also here in the local chat. The Fagel
I think
translation. Thank you.
I think he had a failure to understand his own times.
Mm-hmm.
He was a brilliant reader until until literature arrived at his own time. And then for some reason, he viewed the engagement of people with the issues that were current to them weakness. Although he had never viewed the engagement of issues that were current to people who had passed as a weakness. And I think that's a
You nailed it.
strangeness that I
That is
can't
good.
quite account for. I just can't quite account for that strangeness in his work because it's like he has this gigantic blind spot, and that blind spot is anything that is contemporary to his life. Um,
That is exactly
and it becomes this.
How I felt about Reich Ranitzky too. Oh my God, Ray, you totally nailed it. You have to transcribe what you just said and write an essay about Harold Bloom. Oh,
I refuse. Someone else read it.
Yeah, it's strange. That's right. It's this discomfort with what's happening at the moment.
I mean, this is the opening for the Iliad. I wanted to read the first 4 lines so you can see that this is an issues book. Rage, goddess. Sing the rage of Peleus' son Achilles, murderous, doomed, cost the Achaeans countless losses, hurling down to the house of death so many sturdy souls, great fighters' souls, but made their bodies carrion, feasts for the dogs and birds. What killed them? Achilles' rage, right?
Mhm.
That's that. I mean, that's the issue. Is this is a book? The Iliad is a book about anger, right? And I think that's really it. Sometimes when the issue is very close up, and it's something like our modern reckoning with our recent colonial histories, I think
Mhm.
it's painful to us. The
Yes.
wound is open.
Yep.
It questions our own positions in society. It is deeply hurtful to our ideas about what our country might have been.
Mhm.
And therefore, we don't want to look at it. And in order not to look at it, we will do and we will say anything. This is a character flaw. This is a fault because if we are courageous, then we should be looking deeply at what happened in the past so that we can have a better future. It's very, very hard to look at contemporary events. It's very easy to look at the Iliad, right? And look at that,
Look what they did. Mhm.
right? And so there has to be that we're at an inflection point, and we're having a reckoning with many, many issues right now. I think that the only thing that we can do is be courageous in the face of that reckoning, empathetic and open-minded. Closing sticking our fingers in our ears and saying like la 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 la, I'm not going to hear any of this, you know, stuff is just it's not going to get us anywhere. Like we need to address historical facts and the truth, right? And understand that there are other opinions that matter than just the opinions that were written down in the histories 200 years ago by the victors of those historical events, right? So yeah, I think that he was a person who didn't want to look too closely at modern times and how he got the position that he got, and what kind of advantages he might have been given, and the ways in which the playing field was not level, and those sort of things. But he was extremely effective at looking at things like Shakespeare. I really value his criticism of Shakespeare, for example. Um, he's
But he took
also
down
dead.
also I think he took down J.K. Rowling before it was cool. So that I give him that props. I don't want Harold Bloom to derail the show because we're talking about your book, and I'm going to counter with not counter, but I'm going to add to what you just said about empathy and about looking it straight in the eye with a little quote here from the book where one of the protagonists only here seen as the man across the table to another protagonist by the name of Rustum says, sometimes the man across the table said, I think tea is enough. Enough? Rustum looked up at him. Enough to live for. The next glass of tea. Sometimes I think it's all that is worth living for. This is from The Mountain in the Sea. Ray Naylor, really, really an awesome book that stays with you. And yeah, where it stays with you because it ties in with current issues. If you care about these current issues, if you just care about people hacking into other AIs and all sorts of undercover stuff and whatnot, and nation states in the near future and auto monks, um, then that's also a good book for you. I want to ask you about going back to the octopus. Here's a slide that Shyla, who um, works with me on preparing the show together with Monkey, she put this slide together. If the camera could zoom in, and Shyla titled this slide "Find the Octopus," and these are octopuses hiding. It's absolutely amazing their ability to camouflage. And so I want to ask you, in the book, The Octopuses, communicate with the humans. They communicate in a kind of a symbolic language. They give gifts. Um, it, it's amazing. My question, of course, and I'm sure you this is the first question that you'll be asked all the time is, did you make this stuff up? What's the current research that about octopuses that we know, and how much did you make up with this stuff? Because it's amazing. And then Shyla, also one more thing, she reminded me that at the Monterey Bay Aquarium there was this big octopus exhibit where I went to 2014, and apparently an octopus went out of their um, tank because it saw fish somewhere else, and it crawled to the other tank, ate the fish, and went back to its own tank. Of course, at night where nobody noticed it.
Hmm.
But anyway, so what did you
Hmm.
make up in your book, and what is real?
Yeah, so all of the symbolic communication is made up. So all animals on Earth communicate. All plants, all living creatures communicate internally and externally. They communicate with their environments, and their cells communicate with one another, and their organelles communicate within the cells to do that. Communication is a fundamental of life. So all communication exists at all levels. Symbolic communication, which is, the sophisticated use of language that human beings have, is different. And these octopuses are different in the book because they communicate symbolically. What they use is an exaptation. Exaptation is when evolution, a creature starts to use something that was initially meant for something else for a different purpose. So, for example, human beings exapted our speaking apparatus from our breathing and eating apparatus, right? So we use our throat and our breathing and eating apparatus to speak, but that's not what it was designed for initially. It evolved later to become more sophisticated at speaking, but initially we used a different system. In the book, the octopus uses what's called its ability to create this thing called the passing cloud, which is a real thing that octopuses do, and you can find video of them doing it on YouTube, and it's super cool. They turn very white, then they pass a dark cloud across their skin to startle prey. And they could do this in this really quick way. I decided that they might be able to use that to actually create patterns on their skin that could be symbolic communication, the way that our letters of our alphabet, our symbols in in hieroglyphics, in the symbols of the Chinese language, symbols in the Korean syllabary are symbolic symbol sets that allow us to communicate. And then also our speech is composed of these um, these symbolic levels of grammatical communication that other animals don't have. Animals, by the way, also have some grammar, but what animals can't do, for example, is create an ideology,
Mm.
right? You know, hundreds of laws for a state that have to be existed in, etc. And so what I did was to show how an octopus species might exact the passing cloud system to create a symbolic kind of communication. No, this has not happened in real life. I wanted to create something that was fundamentally plausible, that was scientifically, let's say, realistic, and I'll put it kind of in quotes, but that is not real.
Mm.
I was thinking maybe we could leave a little bit of a time toward the end because I see that it's actually that we've moved through a lot for questions from the audience.
Yeah,
You
people
think that would be all
can
right?
absolutely. People can ask questions. Sometimes people ask a lot of questions. Sometimes people just comment. Um, Anytime, throw it in there, and if I ignore it, please repost. I've had an eye on the chat. I didn't see big questions, but keep them or bring them in right now. We also didn't read anything, which is fine with me because the conversation is fascinating, and it's vast, and we could talk for hours. Of course we can't. um I want to uh Water says that require the capacity for fiction communicating about stuff that doesn't exist in physical reality. Water, please rephrase that so I understand what you mean by that. The
Yes, in order to have
yeah.
in order to have sophisticated fictions, you need to have symbolic levels of communication because symbols can detach themselves from reality. That's correct.
This is what I wanted to do.
Put it
Right,
that way.
right.
Yes.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I want to show the sign here because this is a snapshot from the book here. This is the first sign that the scientists or the team on the island sees the octopus make. And you be the judge. I mean, it's so great. It's so mysterious in the beginning, and then uh, you slowly grasp it, what this could mean, and the octopus responds. I'm putting up the slides. Let's see. The camera has the slides on. Wonderful. And then it kind of arrives at this compound symbol here, whatever
Hmm.
this could mean. I'm not going to spoil anything, but yeah, quite fascinating. Um, should we read? We can have one reading, and it's up to you, Ray. I mean, you have three compelling excerpts here. I am partial to the discussion with about the AI and about consciousness towards the end here, which is the third reading,
Okay.
where the good doctor, whose name I'm Dr. Ankala Minavudotir Chan, who is the mother of Evrim, the
Hmm.
AI, the robot, the android. And if I could ask you to, yeah, the book display has appeared in front of you. Can I ask you to stand up, please, Ray? This is
Hmm.
unfortunately here a very regimented, restrictive environment where our guest needs to. There you go. And the book display will orient itself in front of you magically. There you go. Okay, so set up the scene a little bit. This is where are we? What's happening here?
Yeah, so this is actually a scene in which we are one of the characters is watching an interview occur on. So Everett is actually watching an interview with Dr. Arnkatla Minerva Dr. Chan
Evrim is
about
the android.
Evrim.
Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
And Evrim is the android. And if you can remind me of just where the in moment was that I noted to you.
I think you're not using the epigraph. I wanted to talk about that too, what the role of the epigraph, which is awesome. It's chapter 31. You start right away. You recently
Right.
said, Doctor, and this is a TV interview with a journalist, um, where the Dr. Aminavut Dotir Chan, she's also the CEO of this huge corporation that makes these AIs and all sorts of other things. And she is challenged by a journalist um, after Evrim, the android is in the public, and there's a lot of criticism around AI, kind of what's happening in real life right now.
Right. So you recently said, Doctor, and I quote, "Great and terrible thing about humankind is simply this: we will always do what we are capable of. Certainly, after having done what we are capable of, there must be a moment of regret, especially if what we do causes pain or destruction. The anima has repeatedly been criticized for pursuing advances in artificial intelligence relentlessly with no thought to the consequences for humankind, and with no thought to the people driven out of employment, with no thought to how that intelligence might be weaponized, used against us, with no thought even to the ethical questions raised. What do you say to these accusations?" Dr. Minerva Chen leaned forward, picked a glass of water up from the table, and drank. Ha recognized the gesture. She had taken a class once on interview skills. Drinking water was an opportunity for delay, a moment to collect one's thoughts, a way of breaking up the rhythm of the interviewer's attack. Still holding the glass, the doctor tapped a finger on its surface. The interviewer was growing impatient. He was leaning forward and opening his mouth to restate his question when she spoke. I've spent half a lifetime thinking about these questions, certainly longer than you have. When I took over the company, that must have been around the time you were entering grade school, if I'm not mistaken, Dianima was a small manufacturer of industrial AI, auto freighters and other self piloting craft, smart mining and extraction equipment, that kind of thing. We also held a number of contracts with the military. I don't see. She held up a finger. I'm coming to an answer. You'll have to allow me my way of getting there. Back then, we lived in a fantasy world. People still believed that simplistic, silicon based constructions with binary code logic at their cores could magically cross the threshold into life. Talk of the singularity and emergence. We were constantly accused of risking the annihilation of mankind by tinkering with nature. People somehow feared that these little bits of autopiloting code would turn the tables on us, become our masters. Even in the infancy of AI, where we had wallowed for decades, humankind was afraid. Their heads were full of fantasies, reinforced by their almost religious ideas about the science of the day. But the science they were afraid of did not even exist yet. There was nothing in those silicon, binary code based systems that was a threat to humankind. There was no chance of them evolving into anything. When Dianima came along and changed everything, started using neural connectomes mapped from human minds in our technology, moved to cellular computers, it wasn't simply an advance. It was a revolution. We put to bed forever dreams of simplistic silicon neural networks and all of that. We rendered them obsolete. She drank again. And now the interviewer did not try to interrupt her. She set the glass calmly on the table, brushed a loose strand of hair back from her face. But what we did not render obsolete was the fear humans have of other minds. This society, what we call modern society, what we always think of as the most important time the world has ever known, simply because we are in it, is just the sausage made by grinding up history. Humanity is still afraid that the minds we make to do our dirty work for us, our killing, our tearing of minerals from the earth, our raking of the seas for more protein, our smelting of more metal, the collection of our trash, and the fighting of our wars, will rise up against us and take over. That is, humanity calls it fear, but it isn't fear. It's guilt. Guilt. Yes, guilt. It's a revenge fantasy. We're so ashamed of what we've done as a species that we've made up a monster to destroy ourselves with. We aren't afraid it will happen. We hope it will. We long for it. Someone needs to make us pay the price for what we've done. Someone needs to take this planet away from us before we destroy it once and for all. And if the robots don't rise up, if our creations don't come to life and take the power we've used so badly for so long away from us, who will? What we fear isn't that AI will destroy us. We fear it won't. We fear we'll continue to degrade life on this planet until we destroy ourselves. And we'll have no one to blame for what we've done but ourselves. So we invent this nonsense about conscious AI.
Wow, and that's Ray Naylor reading from The Mountain in the Sea as we're moving towards the end of the program. Big round of applause. This is so cool. And a little bit later, this is a pivotal scene, I think, where basically the doctor, the mother of Evrim, the creator, is in public, in a public interview that is broadcast to probably millions of people, is saying something really, really hurtful about him. And yeah, it's Evrim the android is a fascinating character, Ray. I mean, and especially that interaction with the creator. I mean, there's a lot written with artificial intelligence or with monsters, starting from Frankenstein and the relationship between the creator and the creator. But you did a an amazing job with this relationship, in my opinion. Very satisfying, and as a father who sometimes talks about his son,
Thank you.
boy, that hit home. Okay, you can sit back down again. We have a few minutes left. If there's any questions, please hit us right now with the questions. I touched a little bit on the other aspects that I found very important, is sort of the capitalism in the book, how it's portrayed with those with those AI ships, but also with sort of the greenwashing, the corporate responsibility schemes. Very, very interesting. We don't have time to get into it. The economic inequality, as you depicted, the hierarchy on the ship with the guards is absolutely excellent. I'm looking here at my notes. The ocean, of course, as this huge metaphor, giving life, sustaining life, also taking life. Shyla has a question. I have read that you enjoy writing noir fiction. I found a myriad of definitions for noir fiction. How do you define it? Okay, briefly, Ray, how do you define it? I've never heard that term either. I know that crime noir exists.
Noir fiction is kind of a loose term that is applied to a lot of American crime fiction in the mid-century. Among authors that were writing in that genre, I'd say Patricia Highsmith is one. Dorothy B. Hughes would be another one. Raymond Chandler, writing in detective like fiction. Some detective fiction is noir, especially a lot of the American hard-boiled detective fiction, which was later adapted to films like The Maltese Falcon, etc. I think what noir does the most is to address the darker edges of society. It is difficult to define as a genre because it's a little bit without edges. But you could say that one good example of noir would be the Maltese Falcon, and another good example of noir would be Blade Runner. In fact, in my opinion, and so if you watched those two films and you read, say, The Talented Mr. Ripley or Strangers on a Train, you would get a good sense, a good feeling for what noir is. And that should be
Ah,
enough.
I thought, okay, so it is synonymous with what I thought was just called crime noir, essentially, Chandler and such.
Yeah,
Uh,
so it's not entirely one-to-one synonymous with all crime or all detective fiction, but it overlaps with them, and then it also has overlaps with other genres as well.
um, I have a question because I'm reading Arthur Schopenhauer right now. He's a German philosopher.
I
He is
know.
by and this in one I mean we touched upon it earlier, but what is funny about Schopenhauer was that he apparently talked to plants because he was um they were life to him just like every other parts of life. This goes back to the question, how should we behave, Ray? How should we behave on the planet? What can we even eat? Can we even eat vegetables?
Um, I think that the better we come to understand our place in the ecosystem and our place on the planet and the system that is life, the better we will understand how we ought to behave and what our ethics should be. I think that we've come a long way to understanding that place, and we've come a long way to understanding what is wrong with how we are behaving. But I think that sounds like an evasion. I don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
What I really mean is, in order to understand the answer to that question, first we have to understand what reality on this planet is and what we are doing to this place and what it can take and what it cannot, what it can replenish and what is degraded forever. And then we need to attend to reality. So that strict attendance to reality and to the limits that reality places on our actions are really where our ethics should come from, I think, and also attending to the nature and well-being of other species outside of the human, because their lives do have value. The lives of plants and animals and everything else here has value.
Okay, so I don't have to feel bad if I eat salad then, or I should. Well, we don't. We're out of time, thankfully. Thank you. I'm going to leave us with this last quote that I love very much. One of the characters, who is a hacker, he says, in place of VR, he had raw concentration, a skill gained from living in a one-room apartment with parents who were constantly fighting. He had learned to disappear from the world into worlds of his own creation. As someone who did not grow up with dysfunctional parents, but who is very, very much pro training your imagination by having the things come into your mind's eye rather than having them delivered through a machine. I love that sentiment where you make your own worlds rather than just simply consuming them. Ray, this is
You.
really, really a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. I'm gonna brutally quit.
Thank
Do
you.
you have any last words? Oh, last words
Thank
you
you.
say when you get executed. Anything else you would like to add?
Thank you to everyone for taking this time. You have a lot of things you could do with your time, so thank you. I do hope you read the book and get something for yourself out of it. And it was a pleasure to be here with you.
Get this
Thanks so much.
book, folks. Get this book, and there's other things that people can do, but they can't be underwater and talking about octopuses. Lastly, there is actually, just when I prepared for the show, the Avaz activist group put out a campaign, and I think we have the link ready. Very briefly, I forgot about that, but talk about this. There's basically a petition right now that is trying to ban octopus farming. Oops, is Ray still here?
I'm here. I'm here. Yes, and if people would sign that petition, I would greatly appreciate it, and so would the octopuses.
Yeah, and this was completely new to me that this is even happening. So this is apparently happening in Spain. And yeah, here's the link in the local chat. So check that out. And you were tweeting about this right as I um, prepared the program. So let's go through the credits real quick. Again, thank you, Ray. Thank you, audience here and on
Thank you.
YouTube. The Second Life Book Club established April 8th, 2020. We're coming up on our third year. I might do something special. Let's see what happens. The show is produced by myself, camera sound by Isabel Sharen. Avatars are made by Bespoke Caravan, research by Shyla and Monkey. The location is always second.life/book club. And then there's a teleporter because we now have 4 islands. We might get a 5th one. Draxtor.com/SL Book Club. You find an email there as well if you have recommendations for authors. And again, the show is every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We have 2 sponsors, Bespoke. I just mentioned them. They make fantastical avatars. It's Mud and Jenna Malfi in Long Beach. They're making amazing avatars that are not just furries. They're just the whole spectrum of fantastical. So check them out in World. The other sponsor is the Black Forest board games. I say it every week. Amazing board games that are based on existing board games, but Arden also creates and scripts his very own board games. They are super fun, and I think they're all just $10 each. Absolutely amazing. Next week, Wednesday, 12 o'clock, Perry Roden special number 2 with 2 German authors, Verena Themsen and Robert Corvus. Perry Roden, the biggest sci-fi series in the world, predating Star Trek, predating Doctor Who. If you don't know what it is, come. If you're a Perry Roden fan, you're going to be here anyways. These are the 2 newer authors in the series. Absolutely fascinating. Big fan since I'm 11 years old. And that's happening next week right here on the Second Life Book Club. Goodbye, everyone.
Hi, everybody.